So, fixed firm series, what I call the diamond series, because we're going to break down the Sanskrit. Supta Vajrasana, reclining diamond, or lightning or thunderbolt.
That's a lot of names.
In the Bikram world, they call it fixed firm. So it's fixed firm, half tortoise, camel, rabbit. That's what we're going to be covering right now. So fixed firm, if there's a knee issue, a couple things you can do, because it's really, most likely it's not a knee issue unless somebody smacked your knee with a hammer. It's usually the hips that are the culprit, and in this pose, it's the hip flexors in here. So that's what we have to start working on stretching. So the modification is to bring your hands out in front of you, separate your knees a little bit, and lift your hips way up. And separate your feet a little bit more than that. That's a little too much. So that would be your starting point. 99% of the people that have an issue with their knees, and that's just the front of the knee, can do this. When I work with the Miami Dolphins, they all had knee problems. They have multiple knee surgeries. I had them do this and there was no problem. The hands are taking the pressure off the knee. So now her next step is to go back a little bit with your hands to the side of you. Stay there. That might be the next step. And breathe. Because what she's doing is she's softening the front of the hip flexors by staying in this pose and breathing, opposed to the last thing you want to do is just stick one leg out in the air. That's the knee issue. And bypass it completely. Now she goes back again. Your hands back too. Actually, your knees can come a little closer than that. Yeah. Back a little bit more. And let's say that's as far as you can go. In fact, let's say this is too much. Come back forward a little bit. Bring your hands a little bit in front of you. The hands are going to take the pressure off the knees. It's really taking the pressure off the hips and the ankles. And eventually she can go all the way down, sit in between her feet. You can separate your feet more than that, yeah. Okay, like I said before, let's say her left knee was an issue. Stick your left knee straight up on the floor in front of you. And straighten it. The last thing you want to do is that. And then they think they can go down into the pose. Because it's not about the posture. It's about the body. That's why Vishnu Ghosh created this yoga in the first place. It's not about bypassing so you can do the pose. Now you're bypassing the whole point to help the knee by releasing the hip joint. So come back up. So she's better off where she was before. Bring her leg back. Hands taking the pressure off of the knees and off of the ankles. Let's say she doesn't need the modification. She can start working her way back. Grab a hold of your heels as you go back. So the next, and you separate your feet a little bit more than that. The next step is to touch her elbow, one elbow back behind her. So it would be the right elbow first, then the left elbow. Now stay there, elbow down, both elbows. Yeah, that would be the next step right here. Then the head. Sometimes if they don't touch the head, it's actually worse. I say, no, touch your head on the ground, all the way down. That's actually easier because they have a little bit more of a levered position than having your head hover. If it's going to hover, she can touch the head. Then the shoulders, and all in this order, as the chin comes down. Then she grabs her elbows over her head.
What'd you just say?
Each elbow, each other. And then the knees come together. That's Bikram. Eventually the knees touch. Yeah. And the final goal is complete relaxation. If you're not completely tight, completely relaxed, then you've not mastered the position. And she's going to come up the same way. Grab her feet, push up on one elbow, then the other, and there it is. Up she comes. Good question. What about the lower back? Does the lower back go on the ground? No. It will automatically arch. You don't want to try to overarch it, and you don't want to try to get it on the ground. Just let it happen naturally. I've never seen anybody in this pose get their lower back on the ground. It's just anatomy is not going to happen that way. So don't think about it. Instead, think about relaxing into the pose. Now, face the camera for a second. If you separate your knees way out and do the pose, separate your feet too. In the Bikram world, they don't mind if you separate your knees way out like that and go into the position, even more than that. To me, I don't like it because what's happening is we're bypassing the hip flexors. So I'd rather them bring their knees only hip width apart. It's okay to separate it, but no further than that, and then they can go into the pose. And let's say they can't go all the way back, then that's where they have to go, whatever, back onto that pendulum swing we were looking at, so that we can soften the hip flexors. That's the whole idea. Not to bypass it so we can do the pose. It's not about the pose, it's about you and the body. Wherever your body goes into the position, when you're getting into the right alignment, is just let it go. You don't want to try to make it arch more or less more. You don't want to arch your back more to get into that position. Wherever, so the eye gaze, wherever your head is where your eyes are. You don't want to look up or down, just look straight ahead, wherever your head is. Right. If the hips come off the mat a little bit, it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to, like, you can still go back even though your butt isn't completely on the ground. It's okay to go back. Eventually, as you start breathing in, getting into the pose more, it'll start softening and dropping to the ground. Yes, that's bringing the knees together is the final, actually the second to last step. The second to the last step, bringing the knees together, the last step would be complete relaxation. Let's go half tortoise. Come to the back of the mat. Hips and heels touching. For half tortoise, if you had a towel, let's say sitting like that is killing your knees. You could take a towel and bring it underneath the knees and now sit back. That's a great modification. It takes the pressure off the knees by almost like a buffer. It's really, I actually need to do it. So that's a really good one to do. Yeah. Okay, so we're sitting on the heels, arms overhead. We're going to try to keep our hips on the heels the whole time. That's the key. Palms together, thumbs crossed. She's going to take a deep breath in. As she exhales, she comes down, trying to keep her hips on the heels the whole time. If she can get her foot on the floor before her hands, that'd be cool, if it's possible. Okay, and what she's doing is she's pushing against the floor to get the hips to come down onto the heels. This is one, I really don't want you guys doing much hands-on yet until you become more experienced, but this is one you can do. This is a real easy one. Just put pressure here. Feels good, right, Sarah? Yeah. Takes all the pressure off. We want the little fingers touching, not the wrist. So you can actually point down that way. We want the forehead touching, not the nose. Now, Sarah has a tough time getting her head to the ground. If she were to bring her head all the way to the floor, if she does that, her hips come up. So it's more important to get the hips on the heels than to have the head on the floor. So I don't mind if you lift your head up a little bit, because that's the key. We're stretching the sacrum and the lower back. Eventually, the head will touch down, and the forehead touches on the floor. Go ahead, touch it down. There it is. Boom, you have it, and the hips on the heels. And now when she comes up, she's going to hold the core, take a deep breath in, try to keep her hips on the heels the whole time. As she comes up, arms down by her side, done. But if you see somebody with their head on the ground and their hips off, way up, tell them to bring their hips down and bring their head up, and then eventually work the head down. If you're doing a 75-minute or a 60-minute class, I usually do one set of that. Yes, the arms forward is to get your hips on the heels more. That's the whole idea. Yeah. I mean, you are getting a stretch in the shoulder, but the whole idea is to get the hips down to stretch the lower back. You actually, Purna Kormasana, I'll show you a picture of it later. You bring your shoulders over your head, cross your feet, reach down and clasp the hands behind your back. It's pretty intense. We did it in the advanced class last week, doing the level 2 training. I'll show a picture what it looks like. What we call full tortoise, Krishnamacharyans have a different name for it. What they call full tortoise, we call Mandukasana, which is frog pose. What they call frog pose is completely different. What we call frog pose. So different styles of yoga have different names sometimes for different poses. Okay, camel. Hands on the hips, fingers pointing down to the floor. The first modification is to stay here. Push your hips forward, let the head drop back, and just stay there. A lot of people still can't. Going to a back bend is scary and it can be vulnerable. A lot of people won't even do this. But anybody can do this. Again, if you have a neck issue, you'd have to keep your head here. But if you don't, the head drops. And you're just pushing the hips forward. But people still resist this position because it's vulnerable to do the back bend. Now, there's one modification that I offer in the Barkan method. I really don't offer it when I'm teaching a traditional Bikram class. It's more to the Iyengar modification, is to go up on the toes. Go up on your toes. So now reach back and grab your left heel first, because you really should grab the right heel, but you can see it better. And then the other heel. Get your hands a little lower. It raises the heels a little bit, makes it easier to grab them. It's more psychological than it is physiological. And then come back the same way. Hands on your hips. If you don't need to modify, the feet are flat. She scoops, lift the chest to the ceiling, and then she goes back, right heel first, then the left heel. See how she's got her hips forward. Now, one thing we have to do, and one thing I'll cue, and I'm going to cue Sarah on it right now, you got to get the hands lower down so the base of the palm is on the base of the heel. Even lower, even lower. Fingers inside, thumbs outside. Even lower, hands down more. That's it. Now grab it. Fingers inside, thumbs outside, hips forward, chest opens, and we're going to push the shins into the ground. If I do this, I just stabilized her position. Right, Sarah? It's easier for her now, me doing this, because I'm going outside and in. And now come up, hands on your hips. Hands on the hips, come up. Boom. People, you're going to see a lot of new people, they don't like this pose. They get dizzy in this one. Well, dizzy today because it was hot as can be. I actually got a little dizzy like around standing bow pose. Yeah, because I kept walking back and forth. But offer the modification, hands on your hips. If you're teaching at a traditional Bikram school, don't do the heels up. They might not like it, but it's a really good one to use. Sasanga Asana. If you have a towel, wrap it over the back of your heels. In this case, we're not going to do it so you can see the grip a little better. Now, one of the biggest mistakes I see people make in rabbit pose is they can't grab their heels because they're sitting on them. So they'll go all the way down, touch their head on the ground. Then they'll grab their heels, and then they'll come into the pose. I mean, that's an exaggeration. But you don't want to do that because you come back up for a second. You've got to go from point A to point B. So starts to come down. Bring your hands behind you. As she starts to come down, eventually she'll be able to grab her heels. So say right now, start lifting your hips up. Now she can grab her heels. She wants to touch her forward on the knees before the head hits the floor. Comes all the way up, rolls forward like a wheel till her arms are straight. Shoulders up to the ceiling. See how that lifted her into a better rounded spine? And the heels come together. 80% of the pressure, or I'm sorry, 20% of the pressure on your head at the most. Shoulders up. In this nautilus shell spine we create to counteract the camel pose. And then she rounds up slowly. Voila. Point A to point B, back to point A. Some people can't get their head to the knee. Let's go down and do the pose where your head is away from your knees. Modification. Bring your head like out here. First thing she can do is slowly start to walk her knees one by one up to meet the forehead. Yeah, and a lot of people still won't be able to do that. But still, very light pressure on your head because you can hurt your neck, you can crunch it. You don't want to do that in this pose especially. Okay, come on up. But you're going to see a lot of people, they're not going to be able to round. They're not going to want to lift their hips up. You're going to have to cue them. Get those hips higher. Hold on to the heels. Lighten up on your head weight. If you're ever teaching this one and doing it, which you really shouldn't be, don't ever look to the side. You'll throw your neck out. I've done it. It's not fun. In the old days. So the question is, should the new person observe it on the first set? No. Observe it for a couple seconds. Look what they're doing and then do it. I don't mind telling them to look at it first, but you don't want to, why take them out of the first set? Go take a look, don't do it. That is a unique sequence in our lineage. Most is so because of the rabbit pose. You're not going to see the rabbit pose in other styles of yoga. It's the rounding of the spine, which we also do in standing head to knee, standing separately head to knee, and head to knee on the floor. So fixed firm half tortoise camel rabbit is very unique to our lineage in Calcutta, and that's the Diamond Series. Let's give Sarah an applause. Okay, there it is. Look at the camera. That's our episode for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, hit the notification bell. Any questions about this pose, put them down below. I'm happy to get back to you, and we'll all see you in the next video. Are you waving, Sarah? Bye, guys.